Hello and welcome to Project Freedom, the show that highlights issues of the day. Our format is a simple question and answer. My name is Marty Zients, and I'm joined today by retired Air Force Master Sergeant George Umansky. We're going to be talking about election integrity. George, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Marty. I appreciate the invite.
George, tell me a little bit about your background.
So I started my life off in the Air Force. I retired in 1994, moved down here to Florida. In the Air Force, I did a lot of different things, whether I was in aircraft maintenance, I was in electronics, I was a military training instructor, and luckily finished out my career flying as a C-141 loadmaster. When I got here to Florida, I went into the closed circuit TV and access control industry. I've spent 26 years, mainly as a learning and development manager, director of learning and development for different CCTV manufacturers. So I have a very strong technological background in networking and encryption and all of those things that we deal with in that particular industry, security and surveillance.
First and foremost, what prompted you to run for supervisor of elections in St. Lucie County?
Well, it actually all goes back to my stepfather, believe it or not. I was living in Palm Beach County when I first moved to Florida. My stepfather was living up here. And when the 2012 election happened, I was still in Palm Beach County. He was here, and 2012 was a very bad election for St. Lucie County. And he came to me and he said, "You know what? You need to come up here. You need to run for supervisor of elections because our county's messed up. There's big problems."
So what are your primary goals as the next supervisor of elections in St. Lucie County?
Well, first of all, it all comes down to election integrity and restoring voter confidence. There's just so many stories floating around the ether right now of fraud happening here and ballots being stuffed here and so on and so forth. It's just so many things. And how do we get people, especially here in St. Lucie County, to feel confident that when they cast their ballot, that the votes that they put on there is exactly how it's going to be counted, and that is not going to be canceled out by an illegal vote. So there's a lot of different things that have to happen in order to restore election integrity in St. Lucie County and in the United States, but we're going to focus on St. Lucie County. So first and foremost is our voter rolls. Our voter rolls need to be proactively purged of all those, we'll call them inactive or no longer alive voters, people that have moved out of the county or out of the state or whatever. We've got to get rid of that. And then we also have those people that are here but are actually not eligible to vote. Because if you were to walk into the supervisor of elections office today with a voter registration form and a driver's license, they'd register you to vote. And not once would they ask you if you're a United States citizen or not. Now, how do I know that? I know that because my wife is a naturalized citizen. And when I went with her to register her to vote, they didn't even care to see her certificate of naturalization. I thought, my God, this is absolutely crazy. So who knows how many illegal voters we actually have. And then the next thing would be vote by mail. Now we have a fairly secure vote by mail system here in Florida, right? The rules for how vote by mail works. We don't just haphazardly send ballots out to every single voter. At least we haven't in the past anyway, right? We didn't circumvent the legislation and just decide to do things that way. So if I want to vote by mail, I have to go online or to the supervisors of elections office or by mail, and I have to request that vote by mail ballot. And there was recently a change in the law as well that we have to do that for every election cycle. It doesn't hold over multiple cycles. So that was actually a good thing that happened. Once I request that vote by mail ballot, I'll get a notification that it's been accepted, and eventually that ballot makes its way to me and I can fill it out, and then I can do one of three things with it. I could, during early voting, drop it in a drop box, or I can take it to any of the supervisor of elections offices or satellite offices, or I can put it in the mail and send it in. And I can actually track my ballot through the process. I can actually go onto the St. Lucie County Elections website, and I can see when my ballot is received by the office and when it's actually cast, if you will, right? Where the votes are actually read. So those are all good things about the system. But there's some bad things about the system as well, because here we use a paper ballot system. You've heard the rumors of these voting machines are changing votes when people do this, that, and the other. So we don't have to worry about that here too much, because we have a paper trail, right? We can reconcile the paper ballots against the electronic counts from the tabulator machines. Now, we probably don't do as good of a job of that as we should. I'll come back to that a little bit later. But the point being is, we're not so worried about votes being changed by a machine, but vote by mail ballots from, let's call them ghost individuals, that are added to the count to support one party or the other, and I'm not finger pointing here. That's a problem. How do we prevent that from happening? Well, we do it by verifying the signature on the vote by mail ballot. Okay. The least secure possible method for identifying a person's validity. And that's a big issue. Do we have people that are actually trained to compare one signature versus another? What signature are they actually using for comparison? Is it the signature that was taken when you got your driver's license and you blindly signed an electronic pad, many times with your finger? Try that one day. You know, close your eyes and sign your signature with your finger on a tablet, and then write your signature on a piece of paper yourself and compare the two. They probably don't look anything alike. They might be close, but it would take someone that's trained to actually verify that. So that's a huge issue, this vote by mail and the ability to potentially stuff the ballot box. Now, believe it or not, the governor, when SB 7050 was passed this year, this is our new election law for the state of Florida, enabled or gave power to the supervisors of elections to come up with a plan to add an additional layer of security to vote by mail, whether it be a PIN number or some other method of actually verifying that the ballot was cast by the person that it was intended for.
Okay.
And they kicked the can down the road. The FSE, which is the group called the Florida Supervisors of Elections, it's all 67 of them got together, they formed a committee, and then that committee came back and their recommendation was, it's too difficult. There's no way that we could possibly get that done before the 2024 election. Now, why did they target the 2024 election? Why didn't they just say it's going to take us 6 months, it's going to take us a year, it's going to take us a year and a half? No, they didn't say that. They said we can't possibly get it done before 2024, but they didn't say when they would be able to get it done. And to me, that stinks. That smells. Something's wrong with that. So vote by mail is the area most ripe for fraud in our election system. So we take that and we go back to the voter rolls. If we have voters who are not even here, but yet they're getting a vote by mail ballot, there you go. Now we've compounded the problem. And all of this comes back to transparency. If we can't have transparency in what's going on in the elections office, if the public cannot see what the process is, or if the process is so convoluted that you lose confidence in it, well, that's the big issue, because free and fair elections are the foundation of our republic.
Yep.
That's what it's truly all about. And if we can't add transparency, then all the laws and rules, they don't matter, because you know what happens is supervisors of elections like to make policies. The law says this, but we're going to have a policy that sort of maybe skirts around that law just a little bit. And it's usually biased towards one party or another. And I'm a Republican, but I will tell you this, as a supervisor of elections, I will be the most unbiased person in this entire county, because I look at the job of the supervisor of elections like I would look at a military mission. I'm there to do a job. I'm not there to get Republicans elected. I'm not there to get Democrats elected. I'm not there to get nonpartisans elected. I'm there to make sure that the election process is free and fair for everyone. And when I talk about everyone, I'm talking about those that are legally eligible to vote.
Okay. So let me go back. You alluded to some skills that you possess in previous work environments and even in the military. Mm-hmm. Zero in a little bit on what exact skills that you feel that you possess that would help you ensure election integrity in St. Lucie County.
So first of all, the supervisor's position is really an executive level position, right? You're managing a multi-million-dollar budget, and you're managing multiple processes. And it can be broken down into different areas, but I don't want to go into too much detail on that. But as a senior non-commissioned officer, I went through lots of management training, whether it be the NCO Academy, Senior NCO Academy, and lots of other ancillary courses to prepare me to manage large groups of people or many, many processes. I've had in my lifetime as many as 200 direct reports that I have actually managed, and then I've managed multi-million-dollar budgets. The next thing would be the technical side of it. If you're going to be the supervisor of elections in today's, technology age, you have to understand technology. Absolutely. Right? I'm an Android guy, not an iPhone guy. Why? Because Android allows you to do things that iPhone doesn't. For an example, iPhone's very locked down. Android is a more open platform. I've taught classes in networking, from the most basic networks to very advanced networks. I understand the terminology. I speak the language, or some people say I walk the walk and I talk the talk. Okay? I understand encryption and decryption, wireless versus wired, all of those things that are potential areas where election information could be manipulated, altered, stolen, whatever it happens to be, right? Without going into, great conspiracies, you have to understand the technology. Without that, the supervisor of elections just becomes a figurehead, right? And you're just depending on somebody else to do the work for you. I think the supervisor needs to understand what's being done. Then we go back to the training piece. I told you that I spent a lot of my time in training, both in the military and in the civilian life. And let's face it, every election cycle, we have a lot of election workers, poll workers, that need to be trained. And I was a poll worker. I've been through the training. And I'm not going to say that the training's bad. The training is good. But could it be improved? Absolutely. It's all book learning with very little practical touching of the equipment. And yet, on the day of the election, really, we're touching the equipment all day, right? And if I have a problem, I have to go back and read a book. But what I'd like to see is a more interactive training using training videos and things like that, along with actual touching of the equipment more than just sitting there reading a book. And I think that's something as a training guy that I can bring to the supervisor's office and make our poll workers that much better.
And that leads me to one final question in the area of election integrity. Tell me about drop boxes and the potential there for things to go awry, or where maybe the supervisor of elections who's currently doing the job is not doing her best to ensure integrity in the drop box process.
So drop boxes are a location where a vote by mail ballot can be dropped off versus put in the mail or taking it to a supervisor of elections office. And they're only available during early voting and election day,
Okay.
right? Early voting, election day. Now, each drop box requires that a poll worker called a deputy, who is actually deputized by the sheriff's department, monitors that box. Now, the law, I don't want to go through every specifics on the law, but for instance, if I'm going to go put my ballot in a drop box and my neighbor says, hey, can you take mine for me? I can do that. I can take my own, and I can take up to 2 additional ballots by law. Now, if my family are all eligible to vote, let's say I have a huge family, right? I have many children that are voter age, whatever. We all live close to each other. And we'll say, all right, I've got 8 kids, my spouse, and maybe even a grandchild that's old enough to vote. So now I have 14 ballots from my family. Can I take those all to the drop box myself? Is that legal for me to do that? And the answer is yes. But can I walk down the block of my street and knock on everybody's door and go, hey, I'm going to the drop box. You want me to take yours? Hey, I'm going to the drop box. You want me to take yours? And then I have 50 envelopes from 50 people that are just my neighbors. Am I allowed to put those in the drop box? And the answer is no. But the big question is, if I did that, what would that deputy do when I walked up with that stack of 50 envelopes? And the answer is nothing. Because the deputy has been trained not to confront anyone putting something in that box, for fear that we might prevent somebody from voting. I mean, seriously, if you write a check at the store, you have to show ID, right? You want to register to vote, you have to show ID. But vote by mail, remember, what's the method of validation? It's the signature on the envelope, right? But now, instead of putting it in the mail, you have people coming with stacks of vote by mail ballots. Well, where do they get them from? And once they go in that box, they're there to be counted. So realistically, I kind of say, well, why even have a deputy there? Right? The deputy is there to watch the box, right? He's not watching what's going in the box, and that's a shame, okay? And that is where laws versus policies get misconstrued, and that's an issue, okay? Now, should we have the deputy checking IDs? No. That's not in the law. The law doesn't say that you can do that. And you have to sometimes wonder what's in the law versus what's not in the law. But drop boxes as a whole are just another way to increase potential fraud. Now, those same envelopes, if they were just dropped in a mailbox and mailed in, well, they would still get into the system, wouldn't they?
Yep.
Versus being put in the drop box. So some people say, so what's the difference?
George, are the vote-by-mail envelopes furnished by the supervisor of elections postage-free?
The ones locally are, absolutely. I think if you're overseas, you're going through, say that for the military, for the true absentee voting, there may be a postage requirement to get it in through the post office there.
Well, George, it seems like we've learned a lot about elections just in the few minutes we've had to talk. How can voters, or how can the public, find out more about you and your background and where you stand on the issues? Do you have a website that you could give us to let the voters go take a closer look and maybe make a campaign donation if they're so inclined?
Absolutely. So my website, it's pretty easy. It's Elect Umansky, that's UMANSKY, so electumansky.com, or my full name, georgeumansky.com. Either one will take you to my website, and there you can read my short bio, my extended bio. You can see where I stand on the issues. You can sign up for my news feed, can sign up to support my campaign, and obviously if you want to support my campaign with a monetary donation, that link is there as well.
Super. It's been a real pleasure having you with us today, George. I hope you do well and wish you a lot of success in your campaign.
Thank you, Marty.
Thank you. Thank you for being present and watching another edition of Project Freedom. Until next time.